This is 5 Live Formula One with Jack Nichols.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the second free practice session ahead of the second round of the 2023 Formula One World Championship. It is free practice 2 ahead of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix in Jeddah, and we are with you for the next hour to see whether we learn anything new in the next hour or so. Max Verstappen looking very strong in free practice earlier on today. He was the class of the field, really, and a very impressive performance from him, with his teammate Sergio Perez there in the mix as well. And then the second quickest car this morning, or this afternoon, earlier today, appeared to be the Aston Martin, with Fernando Alonso third quickest and Lance Stroll fourth quickest, 7 tenths and 9 tenths off Max Verstappen respectively. The Mercedes were fifth and sixth with Russell and Hamilton. Carlos Sainz only seventh for the Ferrari team, with Leclerc down in 11th place. So expecting a bit more pace from Ferrari as the weekend unfolds. Don't really expect them to be quite that far back, but the big question that is sort of becoming clear, can anyone beat Max Verstappen? That's going to be the question. Alongside me for this session, we have the BBC's chief F1 writer, Andrew Benson, and we also have the host of the In the Piranha Club podcast, Rebecca Clancy, who is also, of course, the Times motor racing correspondent. And things looked fairly ominous for Red Bull. Well, not for Red Bull, for everyone else other than Max Verstappen this afternoon.
No, Red Bull probably had a lovely little break.
Yeah.
Had a little swim in the sea, took a little chill. Yeah, it didn't look great, did it? It's pretty big. And I know it's only practice and we shouldn't get too excited, but even from Max Verstappen to Sergio Perez was nearly half a second. And on the lap, Verstappen's quickest lap, he didn't even go purple in every single sector, so it wasn't even like he was pushing the whole way around, which he does have a tendency to do. He doesn't always go flat out in practice. We do see sometimes that's why he doesn't top sessions, because I always remember reading an interview with Mika Hakkinen once, who said that he never went flat out in practice because he didn't want people to be looking at his GPS and knowing where he was pushing and where he wasn't and the lines that he took and whatnot. And I have a bit of a sneaky feeling that Max Verstappen does the same thing, but he's so fast, he's so dominant that, I mean, he'd have to be braking to a standstill to be caught by anyone, I think. Yeah,
we'll see what happens in this second practice session, of course. Ferrari were a little bit nowhere, Andrew, in the first free practice session. We were 7th and 11th. We're expecting them to be a little closer than that, I think.
They are expecting themselves to be a little bit closer than that. They came into the weekend saying they thought this track would suit them better, partly because it's less hard on the tyres in Saudi Arabia than it is in Bahrain, and tyre degradation was their big problem in the race in Bahrain, and also because their car was quick on the straight in Bahrain. But actually, that might be a fallacy in a way, because Fred Vasseur, the team boss, was saying in his news conference that he held on Wednesday that straight line speed is all about choice. In other words, you run less wing, you go faster in the straight, you go slower in the corners, which we all know. But the implication of those remarks, or at least the inference I took from them, was that they've chosen to run less wing in Bahrain. Doesn't necessarily mean the car is inherently quick on the straight like the Red Bull was last year. Also, bad news for Ferrari on the engine front. They've taken 2 new engines, one each for both their drivers, as a precaution, they say, after the failure that caused Charles Leclerc to retire in Bahrain, which has also led to him having a 10-place grid penalty.
But I thought they had attributed the failure to the control electronics.
They have, and that's why it's concerning they've changed the engines as a precaution.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Right. So tough times for Ferrari at the moment, potentially. Mercedes in that fight with Aston Martin, which will be very interesting to watch unfold. The sun has set in Saudi Arabia. It's just coming up to 8 o'clock local time, and this is the time that the race will get underway on Sunday afternoon. Verstappen won the Grand Prix last year, only led 6 laps of the 2022 race before he went on to win it, but might lead a few more this season. He's the only driver to have finished on the podium on both occasions on the 2 races in Saudi Arabia. Lewis Hamilton is getting ready to head out in his Mercedes. George Russell sitting at the cockpit of his black Mercedes as well, and they looked like they were a little adrift, to be honest, of the Aston Martins in that first free practice session. About 4/10 slower George Russell was than Fernando Alonso. And the light goes green at the end of the pit lane now. Alonso is the first driver to head out onto the circuit in the Aston Martins. We also saw a lot of soft tyre running from the front runners earlier on. Both Red Bulls deciding to run 2 sets of the soft tyres, and Fernando Alonso as well running 2 sets of the soft tyres. So as a result, they've gone out on the mediums, the Aston Martins, at the start of this session. Sainz and Hülkenberg on the mediums. Sargent and Bottas have gone out on the hard tyres, for those of you wanting to sync up. 59 minutes and 28, 27, 26, 25 seconds to go. Just to... we've had a few emails in the break between the 2 sessions, in principle regarding the sort of regulation chat. So we had quite a big chat about that earlier on, and we won't get too bogged down in it. But James and Mike have both sort of written in. Mike with the email header "impartial Benson," which I quite like. But their sort of suggestion, or their point, is that as the longer regulations go on, fields close up. Is that true, or is that a bit of a sporting misnomer that we think? That's what I'm curious about.
It's what everyone in Formula One says, and it's what happened in towards the end of the last set of regulations. So if you look back at a table of comparative performance, you'll see, for example, in 2021, McLaren were only half a second a lap on average off Mercedes over the whole season, whereas now they're more like 1.5 seconds off. And the field spread gap, the gaps between the teams got bigger from 2021 to 2022 as regulations changed. And it also happened for example,
towards 2012.
A little bit, although what I was about to say is it doesn't always apply, because that's a good example of where it didn't, because in 2013, Red Bull hit on something with their car about a third of the way into the season, and Vettel won every single race in the second half of the year. And actually even in 2012, where it started very competitively, where people remember famously there were 7 different winners from 7 different teams in the first 7 races that year. By the end of the year, Vettel was, in terms of performance, the Red Bull was again dominant. So it doesn't always translate into results, but it does translate into gaps. So does that answer the question?
Yes, I suppose. So do we need to give these regulations more time before we're slamming them in the second year?
Well, we're not. Are we slamming them?
No, I know. I'm being flippant.
I mean, I was just...
We were discussing in pre-practice one that they haven't worked.
Yeah, I was just expressing my opinion based on the facts as we have them at the moment, that the idea of the regulations was to close up the field and make the racing more competitive and allow the cars to race closer together. The final one of those has worked. They can race closer together, but the racing is not more competitive, and the field and the fields is not closer. So in that sense, they have failed. And the other point to make was that the intention was to, this is a sort of secondary point, but almost more important, was that they tried to write the rules to be very prescriptive, so that teams couldn't eke out big gaps over other teams. But Adrian Newey was telling me the other night, when I bumped into him at an event in London, that he thinks that actually there are lots of things that they didn't realise were there, the rule makers, that mean you can make a big difference with these rules.
So there we go. Hopefully that answers some of your questions. James also said, can we not accept that half the fun of Formula One is seeing it as the engineering challenge and not just a driver's championship? If you want that, watch GT3, says James. So a fair point. And that's one that I don't really... I'm not too fussed that the cars are different. I think if everyone was in one make cars, it would be a lot of fun, but I accept that there's strong feelings against that. 55.5 minutes to go. Carlos Sainz has done a lap time, a 1 minute 31.080. Valtteri Bottas has had a lock-up and gone straight on at turn 1. So has Hamilton. Bottas was on the hard tyres. Hamilton was on the medium tyres. And Yuki Tsunoda has, he's brushed the wall, I think, on the inside of turn 23 there. Yuki, one of the fastest corners on the circuit, and I think he might have brushed the inside wall before then running wide on the exit of turn 22 and then carrying on his way. Verstappen and Perez are straight out of the pits as well, both of them going out on the both of them going out on the medium tyre. Verstappen's just coming across the line now, and he goes 13th fastest, 23 seconds off the pace. So that was a out and then a prep lap for Verstappen, and now he maybe will be on a push lap on those medium tyres. Pierre Gasly does the fastest first sector of anybody, but in the Alpine, having left AlphaTauri at the end of last season, but the order currently, medium tyre runners, the top 7, Sainz, Alonso, Hülkenberg, Stroll, Ocon, Albon and Zhou. David says ultimately we need Adrian Newey to leave Red Bull and write the rules. Seems like a reasonable plan, Beck.
Well, actually, Andrew and I were having this conversation earlier, because Adrian Newey did leave the team for a little bit and Red Bull did fall away slightly in performance, and then Adrian Newey came back to the team and Red Bull back at the front again. Part of the reason we were having the conversation was because we were talking about Mercedes and how they can recover their form and what they need to do. They've obviously lost some very important people recently. Red Bull have been poaching a lot of their staff. They've lost a few to Aston Martin. James Allison, who's a key figure in that team, he's sort of stepped away from his role. He's still very much with the team, but he's not day-to-day anymore. And perhaps Mercedes need to do a bit of a Red Bull and pull James Allison back into the team so he's much more involved than he currently is, because it's made a huge difference for Red Bull. I mean, Adrian Newey went off and designed the Valkyrie. Was it the Valkyrie that he was doing? Yeah.
Yeah.
And they missed
him. He did a bit
him.
of boats as well, didn't he?
Yeah, he did a bit of the America's Cup as well, didn't he? Yeah. And they missed him much more than they thought they were going to. And, well, he's had the impact that we all know that he has. I mean, the man's a genius.
Verstappen across the line do a 1 minute 30.801 on the medium tyres, takes him almost 3/10 quicker than Carlos Sainz. Sound you can hear now is Lance Stroll getting onto the brakes into the final corner. On the power, up through the gears and towards the line. Stroll and Alonso about to come across the timing beam, and Stroll does a 30.9, which is a 10th slower than Max Verstappen. Alonso coming towards the line now, and he goes fastest, a 1 minute 30.612 on the medium tyres, 2/10 quicker than Max Verstappen on the same tyre, but I'm not falling for that one again after Bahrain. Sainz and Leclerc 4th and 5th, 4 and 6/10 away respectively. Hamilton 7th, again on the medium tyre, but 1 second adrift of Fernando Alonso's time. And Alonso ended up having a bit of a slide at turn 22 and scraping the bottom of the car along the curbs, very close to the wall there for Alex Albon as well, as he came out of turn 18, and he's coming now towards turn 22. The Haas darts dramatically out of the way. Albon's 8/10 down after the first 2 sectors, and the Williams looks moderately midfieldy, I would say, so far. It's only been free practice 1, but these low downforce circuits, or straight line speed circuits rather, were where they performed well last year. Albon finished free practice 1 9th fastest in the Williams, so ahead of the AlphaTauris and the Alpines and the McLarens and the Haas's and the Alfa Romeos. So we'll see what he can do here. He goes 8th fastest, exactly 1 second slower than Fernando Alonso. So potentially some strong performance there from Williams this weekend. A lot of Flovis on the rear wing. I think it's like, it looks cool enough that it kind of fits in with the car, but I'm pretty sure it is red Flovis rather than just a nice new red rear wing for the weekend. Norris has gone 11th quickest on the hard compound of tyre, 1.7 seconds slower than Alonso, but he was slowest in free practice 1, Lando Norris. No lap time yet from Sergio Perez. He's just come through sector 1, 2/10 slower than Lance Stroll, who has the fastest first sector time. He's now coming through the middle sector, coming out of coming into the left-hander now of turns 18 and 19, and then weaving towards turn 22. He's a 10th down on Alonso after the middle sector here, Sergio Perez. And he's pretty much matching Verstappen so far, but Verstappen's doing another lap on the medium tyres. So lots of early lap times coming in. Perez coming up to the final corner now. DRS open, slams shut as he swings into the final corner of turn 27, out across the line, and Sergio Perez goes quickest, a 1 minute 30.428, which is 2 tenths quicker than Alonso managed, and Verstappen is going quicker than that in Sector 1. Gasly goes 5th fastest on the mediums, only half a second away from Sergio Perez. That feels like the most encouraging lap time from an Alpine that I've seen all season, to be honest, that from Pierre Gasly. Verstappen coming for the middle sector, he's half a second up on Sergio Perez. So much speed through turn 22. And this could be a big lap about to come in from Verstappen. It's only his, it's his second lap of the session, whereas Perez has only done one so far. Fernando Alonso's returned to the pit lane. He's the only driver not on circuit. Verstappen right up to the wall on the exit of the final corner at turn 27. And he goes fastest, but only by almost 4 tenths of a second. Not quicker than Perez in the final sector there, Verstappen. But once again, Red Bull looking strong.
It's ominous, isn't it?
Yeah.
The word that's banned, almost banned as much as tyres. Yeah, it's not great, is it? I mean, he didn't look that comfortable in the final sector, as you said, wasn't quite as quick as his teammate Perez, but he was half a second up after those first 2 sectors, which is just, I mean, it's a hard pill to swallow for his rivals, isn't it? I just don't know how they come back at him at the moment.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? As Verstappen had a bit of a slide coming out of the final corner, got right up to the wall on the exit. Ocon is on a lap at the moment. Hamilton comes through now on the medium tyre, and he's heading down towards turn 1. There is a yellow flag out there in the final sector. Well, it's gone green again now, so someone had a brief incident somewhere on circuit, maybe just running wide at turn 22, as we've seen a number of cars do. Hamilton into the first few corners at turns 4, 5 and 6, and then right up to the wall again through 7, 8, 9 and 10, and then down towards turn 13. First sector split for Hamilton is half a second away in sector 1. And Hamilton did say yesterday that straight line speed isn't where we're struggling anymore like it was last year. Last year we were sort of all right in the corners but slow on the straights. Now Hamilton's saying all the lap time really appears to be in the corners, which is obviously not where you want it to be. You don't want it to be lost anywhere, I suppose, but Hamilton through the middle sector split, and he's now 7 tenths away from Max Verstappen. Coming towards the final corner at 27. Oscar Piastri's first sector is 8 tenths away from Max Verstappen, but Piastri is on the hard compound tyre. As Hamilton comes through the final turn, up through the gears and towards the line, and he goes 9th fastest, 9 tenths of a second away from Max Verstappen at the moment. So you've got Alonso in there in 3rd behind the Red Bulls. Ocon is in 4th, Albon is in 5th, Leclerc is 6th, Gasly 7th, Stroll 8th, Hamilton 9th, Sainz is in 10th. Into the pits comes Piastri at the end of his lap. So 11th is George Russell, Hulkenberg 12th, Joe, Sargent, Piastri the top 15. De Vries jumps up into 13th place, so Piastri drops to 16th, and then it's Norris, Tsunoda, Magnussen and Bottas. Gasly at the moment is improving, he's currently 7th fastest, and he goes up to 4th. So the Alpines, I mean, that is the strongest we've seen from Alpine all season, really, because they said after Bahrain that they sort of didn't really know where they were, Alpine.
Well, they also said that they didn't expect Bahrain to be a good track for them. It hasn't traditionally been a good track for them, so they weren't too disappointed. Well, they were disappointed with the way the race turned out because they had a shocking weekend, but in terms of their absolute pace, they weren't too disappointed with qualifying in the lower reaches of the top 10, which is where Esteban Ocon qualified before he completely messed up his race with a series of unfortunate errors. Pierre Gasly did a really good drive actually to come back from the back of the grid to finish 9th. So I think they will be expecting to have a better weekend in Saudi Arabia. Here's some radio from Leclerc.
Hulkenberg or whoever that Haas is. It was a joker.
Yeah, it was the Haas sort of right on the racing line coming through the left-hander of turn 13, and Leclerc had to sweep around the outside of him. Carlos Sainz has had a run wide at turn 22 as well. Currently 7th and 10th fastest, Leclerc and Sainz, but we'll get a bit more of a representative look when they put on some soft tyres a little later on in this session. Verstappen finds a bit more time and now goes almost half a second clear of Sergio Perez up at the front, with Alonso there in 3rd, Gasly in 4th, Ocon in 5th. That was a question we had earlier on, sorry to whoever tweeted it in. Oscar Piastri, early regrets, do you think, going on right now for Piastri, that he's gone to McLaren and not stayed with Alpine?
Well, let's be clear, he didn't have a chance to drive for Alpine this year. He was going to be farmed out to Williams, was their plan, because their plan, before they completely messed it up,
El Plan.
Yeah, exactly, irony, was to retain Fernando Alonso alongside Esteban Ocon and his son Verstappen radio.
It's just my headrest. I'm laying down too much. I cannot feel the car.
So Verstappen saying his headrest is a problem. He's lying down too much and he can't feel the car, so he wants to be sort of sitting up a bit straighter, I suppose, or with the headrest a little bit higher up. Do continue.
Yes, they wanted Alonso and Ocon in the car, and they were going to the idea was to keep Piastri within their stable and give him a year or two at Williams. The plan that they said they were working on didn't really make a lot of sense, because they were refusing to give Alonso a 2-year contract, which is why he ended up leaving. But they were trying to get Piastri to sign a 2-year contract at Williams. So they never quite explained how they were expecting that to work. Anyway, they lost both of them in the end. So his choice wasn't to be in an Alpine or a McLaren, to come back to your question. It was to be in at Williams or at McLaren. Having said that, that in itself might not be that much of a great choice, because Williams were pretty close to McLaren at times in Bahrain. We haven't really seen McLaren's actual race potential, because Norris had a very difficult race with air pressure leaking constantly, and Piastri was a bit off the pace on his debut in Bahrain. He was lacking confidence in the quick corners in the middle of the Bahrain lap. So
he was kind of coming through before he retired. He was sort of up there, maybe sniffing around a point or something.
Yeah,
but
and he's doing very well so far. He's actually a couple of, or a tenth and a half ahead of Norris. They're down in 17th and 18th places. But so anyway, I think it's a bit early to make a call on whether he's made the right decision on that front. But you know, if you're asking questions about have you made a mistake staying at McLaren, you could apply them to Lando Norris just as much as you could to Oscar Piastri.
Yeah, but Norris has got a 15-year deal or whatever, isn't he?
Yeah, and he doesn't like the suggestion that he made a mistake signing the extra long contract, does he? That didn't go down well when he was asked about that in Bahrain, when it was clear that McLaren wasn't quite the car that it should be. He's adamant that McLaren, well, I mean, what else do you expect him to say? Adamant that they're going to be back at fighting the front of the midfield, as it were, not right at the back. But yeah, I mean, Norris is absolutely convinced that he's done the right thing, wedding himself to McLaren for as long as he has. And Piastri, I mean, I agree with Andrew, it's far too early to say at the moment. He's got to give the team a chance, the team have to give him a chance. You know, I believe it works both ways. McLaren are a strong outfit. I said it during FP1, I just do not understand how they missed their development targets in the way that they have. I don't understand how they've arrived this season with the car as bad as it is. But they are fundamentally a very good team. They do have the personnel to get back to where they should be. So hopefully things will improve down in Woking.
Andrew, is there any because obviously Andreas Seidel was sort of in charge of all, has he kind of managed to dodge a bullet by kind of getting out of McLaren, and so no one's, you know, slamming him for incompetence, and McLaren have messed it up and Seidel's it, because ultimately his kind of McLaren record looks pretty strong.
Well, Andreas Seidel doesn't design the car, does he? And what's happened is that there was a it's to do with the floor edge. You know, we were talking about this in the first practice, to do with another team, but McLaren is another team that's they realised too late that there was a change in floor edge design that they hadn't noticed, which was going to open up a whole new avenue of development. And so when once they realised it was there, they started pursuing it, and they locked in a sort of less competitive first few races car than they would have liked, and they've been quite open about the fact that they missed this development. They should have noticed it earlier. Andrea Stella, the new team principal, said that at the launch of the car. He was saying it in the test before the first race, and he was saying it at the first race weekend as well. Andreas Seidel's got plenty on his own plate, having moved to what is currently called Alfa Romeo, but is actually really Sauber, but actually really Audi. Because Audi have now completed the first stage of their buy-in to that team, which is going to end up with them taking a majority shareholding and it morphing into the official factory Audi team in 2026. And I think not enough people have quite realised that although Andreas Seidel has gone there as the chief executive officer of Sauber, he's gone there as an Audi appointment to turn the team into Audi. And obviously Audi are not going to be happy with being, where's Valtteri Bottas at the moment? 20th. So he's got a lot on his plate, so he's yeah.
Oh, Fernando Alonso out of shape through turn 22. He's the first front runner to put the soft tyres on and was improving fastest first and second sectors, but too much speed into turn 22, the fast left-hander, and got out of shape. And so as a result, this won't be, well, he might still improve because he cut the corner effectively, but it comes across the line now, does jump up into second place, but not a legitimate lap time there for Fernando Alonso. I don't know if it'll get deleted because of track limits or anything, but it was a big moment as he came into the left-hander and the back end just started to go a little, and he went straight over in the end in the runoff area, bailed out of it early rather than running out over the curbs.
Well, he's cut the corner, Jack, but I can't imagine that was actually quicker than staying on the track.
No, agreed.
He would have backed off and had a bit of a brown underpants moment, I think.
I had this argument in with the Formula E race director once because they deleted a lap time for track limits. The guy went off through the gravel, spun, rejoined the circuit, and then finished his qualifying lap. And up it comes, lap time deleted. And you're like, oh, really? But they were like, well, no, he's been off the set. We have to delete all the track limit lap times. Otherwise, you can't get into a situation trying to judge, was it quicker or did he gain an advantage? You just have to delete them all. So it was fair enough on that occasion. Speaking of, and Benson, you can react first to this. Kaylee says, wonder if Lando or Oscar wish they'd gone for the McLaren Formula E team instead.
No, is the answer to that.
Definitely not.
I thought you two would enjoy that one. 37 minutes and 43 seconds left on the clock. So, Verstappen quickest at the moment. He's just left the pit lane on a brand new set of soft tyres. Perez is pushing now, also on a set of softs. Carlos Sainz, did he start his lap on? Maybe he's got a bit of traffic very early on this lap because he'd done his outlap on this set of soft tyres and he's crawling around now, so maybe some early traffic for Carlos Sainz. Perez, meanwhile, coming through the final sector. In fact, he's just going to be coming past Carlos Sainz as they come down towards turn 27. Sainz keeps out of the way and Perez comes down into the final corner. Sparks flying from underneath the Red Bull, and Perez is going to be across the line and quickest here, a 1 minute 29.902, 500ths quicker than Max Verstappen managed, but Perez on the soft tyre. Sainz starting a lap now in the Ferrari, Russell starting a lap in the Mercedes also as they come down into the first couple of corners. Perez keeping out of the way of Sainz. Sainz into the brakes into turns 4 and 5, then into 6 and 7 where he had some big moments. In fact, did he end up in the wall at turn 7 a few years ago, or did you just have a big spin? I can't remember which one it was, to be honest with you. Alonso still in the pits, having done his run on the soft tyre, or his first run on the soft tyre. Sainz is 4 tenths down after sector 1 on Sergio Perez here. Not a personal best for Sainz either in the first sector, so that suggests that he's not hooking it up, but Leclerc's not quick in sector 1 either, to be honest. Oh no, but he's 6 seconds off the pace, so whatever has happened to Leclerc has scuppered him in the first sector. What Sainz got through the middle sector, he's done a personal best, but he's 7 tenths away from Sergio Perez through sector 2. Verstappen is starting a lap now. Russell goes 6th fastest on the softs, which is slower than the Alpines on the medium tyres. Yellow flag out in the middle sector at turns 15 and 16 and 17, that sort of sequence of corners, which is the sort of flat out meanders that make their way back up towards the turn 22. Can't see, yeah, track's gone green, so I couldn't see a car stop there, but across the line comes Sainz. What was that lap? 1.1 seconds slower than Sergio Perez. It's abysmal if it's true, but maybe there are some mitigating circumstances. Just having a look at Fernando Alonso. He's back in the pits, but he almost had a sort of coming together with Carlos Sainz a little earlier on. But it wasn't particularly dramatic. It was dramatic enough, to be honest, and then I think they got in the way of the Williams as well. So all a bit busy traffic-wise on the streets of Jeddah this evening. 34 minutes and 27 seconds remaining, but that Sainz lap is very concerning. Leclerc's on another push lap. Here he comes then through sector 1 now, and compared to Fernando Alonso, who's got the fastest first sector, Leclerc's 4 tenths away from Alonso in sector 1. It's through the middle sector now at turn 13. Still Alonso the only driver in the pits, but he was the first to go out on the soft tyre. Leclerc coming through the middle sector. Lance Stroll's about to start a flying lap, as is Max Verstappen behind him. So Verstappen is out now on his new set of soft tyres, so we'll see what lap time he can do. Leclerc after the middle sector, 28.6, and loses another 3 tenths, so he's 7 tenths down. He's going to struggle to beat the Alpine's lap time on the mediums here. Coming now on the flat-out blast towards the final corner at turn 27. He's currently slower than the Williams of Alex Albon, Charles Leclerc. Comes out of the final corner now, across the line, and Leclerc goes 4th quickest, so he does get ahead of the Alpines, finds a bit of time in the final sector, and as a result is half a second away from Sergio Perez. But we've got Verstappen's time incoming shortly. He's just coming through sector 1 now, and actually might have backed off in sector 1, Verstappen. He's backed off in sector 1, so no improvement coming this time around for him. Hulkenberg goes 4th fastest, 2 tenths slower than Perez. We saw that a bit in Bahrain, didn't we? Hulkenberg would just bang random quick laps in a very impressive fashion. So Hulkenberg goes ahead of Charles Leclerc. It's not looking strong for I know, obvious thing to say, but it's tough. They look further away than I thought they were going to be.
I think we can say safely that they're not, you know, I mean, no one shows their full hand in Friday practice, but I think we can safely say that right now, today, with Leclerc at least, Ferrari are not, they're out of kilter with everybody else. There's no way Leclerc is going to be actually slower than Hulkenberg and Gasly in terms of absolute pace. And let's not forget, he's got a 10-place grid penalty. He won't be doing any real, or he won't be concentrating on qualifying running as much as he might have been, although
Surely
having said that, he will want to qualify as well as he can, because he wants to start as high as he can even with the penalty. But it still changes the focus of his weekend slightly.
Ocon after the middle sector, just a quarter of a second down on Sergio Perez. Ocon on the soft tyres now, coming towards the final couple of corners. As I say, Verstappen yet to do a quick lap on his new set of softs. Albon comes through and is 10th fastest. Not huge lap time jumps from the medium to the softs, it seems, so far. De Vries goes up into 13th place. Ocon goes up into 7th place in the Alpine in the end, as he comes across the line. Gasly still there in 5th position, but Verstappen is starting a lap now. He's coming through turns 4, 5 and 6, and then out towards 7 and 8, down towards the big sweeping left-hander of turn 13. Sound you can hear is the Red Bull, and through sector 1 he is almost 3 tenths up on Sergio Perez through the first third of the lap. Down through the gears at 13, and now coming through these meanders at turns 15, down a couple of gears into 17. Piastri jumps up to 15th fastest. Middle sector split incoming for Verstappen as he approaches turn 22 at 205 miles an hour. He's almost 4 tenths up now on Sergio Perez. Hey, Leclerc's first sector, 400ths slower than Perez. Still a long way off Verstappen, but this is a bit more like it for Charles Leclerc and Ferrari. Verstappen into the final corner. Hamilton goes up to 8th fastest in the Mercedes, quicker than his teammate George Russell. Verstappen goes to the top of the times by 0.3 of a second. How's Leclerc doing compared to Verstappen in the middle sector? Half a second away. So that time has dropped adrift for Charles Leclerc and the Ferrari squad. Sainz is just starting a lap. He's down in 19th quickest at the moment. The field is only separated by 1.4 seconds. So it's pretty tight overall on that front right now. Here comes Sainz across the line. No, sorry, he's only coming through the middle sector. I got a bit too excited. It's Leclerc who's coming across the line, splits the Alpines. So the first sector didn't look too bad, but the lap time just drifted away, and not even a personal best in the final sector for Charles Leclerc. And Gasly's improving again on these same set of soft tyres, I think. Yeah, he's on a second lap. Sainz, meanwhile, is 0.6 down after the middle sector. Looking strong for Verstappen. Alonso still there in 3rd. 4th quickest is Hülkenberg. Gasly is 5th. Leclerc is 6th. Where is Carlos Sainz going to slot into this equation? 8th fastest. And Gasly improves to go 4th quickest. And they're still finding time, so the tyres are lasting for these hot laps quite comfortably. But the order is now Verstappen, Perez, Alonso, Gasly, Hülkenberg, the top 5. Leclerc, Ocon, Sainz, Hamilton, Stroll, the top 10. Stroll's on a lap. Norris in 11th, Russell 12th, Albon 13th, 14th Magnussen, 15th Joe, De Vries, Sargent, Piastri, Tsunoda and Bottas, the 20 drivers at the moment. Again, still more improvements coming in. Here comes Fernando Alonso out across the line. 3rd quickest currently. Does he get ahead of Perez? He does. Only 0.2 away from Max Verstappen. Lance Stroll goes into 4th place. Again, the sort of traditional 0.3 back from Fernando Alonso.
Traditional's a bit strong for the second race of the year, the first one he had 2 broken wrists with. But anyway, that's an encouraging lap for Alonso in terms of competitiveness, because let's not forget that'll be the same set of tyres that he used for his first run, where he had the mistake at turns 22 and 23.
Yeah. But he's still 0.2 off Verstappen, who didn't even set a personal best in the final sector. So it looks like Verstappen was easing off towards the end of that lap, and he's still 0.2 up on Alonso, who's in 2nd. So isn't that worrying?
And free practice 2 in Bahrain last weekend was when we all got a bit too excited. Of
course it's worrying. I don't think anyone's under any illusion, are they, that Verstappen's going to romp away with this weekend as well. But I was just saying, beside Verstappen, where, it's not a bad time, is all I'm saying, considering it's the second lap on a pair of tyres that will be past their best.
And we all want to see Fernando Alonso up there, so I'll take it.
And you didn't even use the joke.
Yeah, I know, I'm saving it. I'm saving it till later. Can I ask you a question about Alonso, though? Because I got thinking in Bahrain about him, and he did some brilliant racing. We saw it, reminiscent back in the days of 2007, him on Hamilton going wheel to wheel, the move he did on Russell. And I've been thinking about this ever since Bahrain. Fernando Alonso, Lewis Hamilton, they're pretty old-school drivers because they didn't have DRS back at the start of their careers. Is that why they're so good? Because they grew up racing in the top tier of single-seater racing without DRS? Is that what makes them so good? Do we have these younger drivers now who are too reliant on DRS for overtakes?
I don't know is the answer, if that's the reason why. But what I would say is that I think good as Hamilton and Alonso are at racing, I don't think that there's anything wrong, for example, with the racing skills of Verstappen, although he's a bit aggressive, or Leclerc, for example, who was, if you think about the couple of races that he's had at Silverstone, when he was defending against Verstappen in 2019, was it? And then last year against Perez and Hamilton with the old tyres and overtaking Hamilton around the outside of Copse on old tyres and stuff. He's pretty spectacular when it comes to racing. So I think it's just about talent more than DRS particularly.
No, it's an interesting question, because Verstappen never had DRS, did he? Because he went straight from European Formula 3 up to Formula 1. And that first year he was, well, look, he's always been a bit aggressive, hasn't he? With the Oscar Piastri was coming up to an AlphaTauri and a Ferrari, both going sort of fairly slowly, and he did that thing that you do on the motorway. You go, oh, I could just go through the middle of them here, but then you realise you probably shouldn't. It's not going to end well. Here's George Russell's radio. Okay, he swore, and I don't know referring to what. So.
And a hand wave. He was not a happy bunny, was he?
He's gone fourth quickest, actually, Russell, in all of that. I don't think I mentioned it. So Russell goes fourth quickest, which is not too bad for the Mercedes gang. Gasly fifth, Stroll sixth, Hülkenberg seventh, Ocon eighth, ninth and 10th, the Ferraris of Leclerc and Sainz. Oh yeah, that was it. When Verstappen entered F1, didn't he go like around the outside of, was it Sainz at Blanchimont or something?
We need to make some big changes. Yeah, copy.
Russell's saying we need to make some big changes.
Wasn't it a Sauber? Wasn't it Felipe Nasr?
Oh yeah, it was. Yeah, I think it was Nasr. You might be right.
No, I'm not saying all young drivers are.
No, but I don't
on
mind
DRS.
it as a sweeping statement.
No. No, I mean, Verstappen's a pretty special talent, as we all know. He's an unbelievable driver. Leclerc, I don't think is as good, but is a very special driver as well. But I just wonder sometimes if some of these drivers on the grid are too reliant on DRS.
Yeah, well... Well,
I don't know the answer, by the way.
No, I know, but I like it as a question. But then you wonder, well, actually, do you have to be reliant on DRS? Because that's the way it goes. You know, we often see people not making an overtake when they could, because actually you're better off to wait until you get DRS.
But wouldn't it be more exciting sometimes if we had more Fernando Alonso's doing what they do?
Yeah. Hate DRS. I hate DRS.
Well, what was interesting about that battle was that he had decided he was going to struggle to get past Hamilton in the usual places, although I think he was probably over-egging that problem slightly because he made a mistake at the apex of turn 4, which is what allowed Hamilton to get back past him when he had overtaken him in that, which was a traditional place there. But what he said after the race anyway was that he was actually struggling for straight line speed in Bahrain because Aston Martin had chosen a higher downforce setup than most of the other teams. So he was having to look, he felt he was having to look for other places to get the moves done, to make them stick in the way that he wasn't being able to make them stick at the usual turn 1 and turn 4 spots. So that kind of led him into that move, or to try that move. And I don't know, Jack, did we work out whether we'd ever seen anyone in Formula 1 overtake into turn 10 before?
Oh, I'm sure I've seen it, but in the early days of Bahrain. I didn't actually look it up. Hashtag BBC F1, come on, help me out, all of you people. I'm sure it was like Tony Oliuzzi and Giancarlo Fisichella or something in like 2000 and, I want to say 7 or 8, when they had the white lines on the tyres. That's I think something like that happened at some point.
But I suppose that's the point of my question, that we just don't see sort of different racing. We get the DRS chicken, which we're obviously not going to get here because they've moved the DRS line now. But it's just, we don't see enough of that. We don't see maybe enough challenge, enough fighting, enough... I'm not a fan of DRS, is probably the point I'm trying to make. But I want to see, you know, what Andrew was saying about what Fernando was saying after the race. That's really interesting to get into the mind of the racer and listen to what he says and where he's exploring areas. And, you know, there's tiny, that, you know, they see gaps that, well, I'm definitely not going on a moto with you, Jack, but they see gaps that the rest of us don't see. So I find it really fascinating to see him, you know, at the age of 41, he's clearly not lost any of his racecraft. He's absolutely superb, at the top of his game still. And I love watching him race. I just wonder if there's still that sense that, you know, the go-karter in him, or having come through the series, the lower, you know, back in the day when they were GP2 and all that. I don't know. I just wonder sometimes if the younger guys don't quite have that edge, maybe. And I'm not including Verstappen and Leclerc in this, but and I appreciate the point about talent.
No, it's really interesting. Because Alonso actually didn't come up through the sort of traditional means, did he? What did he win? Formula 3000 by Nissan?
Hang on. Are we going to allow Andrew free reign on Alonso's career?
He won Open Nissan or whatever it was called.
Formula Renault Open Nissan.
What became Formula Renault 3.5 in his latter days. And then he went straight to Formula 3000, did 1 year there.
Oh, he did do a year in F3000.
Not that great a team, but he won at Spa. And then went into Formula 1 from there.
Yeah.
Have you written his biography yet?
He's actually writing his own book, but it's been delayed. I was actually asking his...
For Christmas?
No. I was talking to his manager, or his best friend, actually, Alberto, the guy with curly hair. If people have seen on telly, there's a guy with curly hair hanging around in the back with Alonso. That's Alberto. And he was saying that they delayed it because they decided they couldn't reveal everything they wanted to reveal about the McLaren Honda years, so they decided to put it on ice.
You got to wait till you've properly retired, I think.
Which is a shame because, I mean, because it's the
Want to read it now?
Yes, exactly. With all that stuff about Spygate, for example, and Singapore, and just that's going to be if he. Do you
think it's going to be true?
Well, that's the whole question, isn't it? Is it if he says everything he could say, it's going to be an absolute blockbuster. Because my first question was, is it going to be in English or is it just going to be in Spanish first of all? But that's how we got onto it.
Have you not offered to ghostwrite it?
Well, they've already found someone to write it, obviously. So that otherwise, you know, I would like to write a Fernando Alonso book. I have to be honest.
I'm sure you would.
Great story.
Wonder who they've got to ghostwrite it. Ed Straw. Maybe it'll be Ed Straw and it'll end up being the 10 best Fernando Alonso races in the Minardi or something like that. Great content as ever from Ed and the gang. 19 minutes on the clock.
Ed can't actually hear you now. Do you know that?
Oh no, he can't because we're not on the Formula One app anymore. Yeah, that's a shame.
So we can say whatever we like about him.
There's also a journalist called James Roberts who's very disappointed that he can't listen to us anymore because he, after every session, if I saw him in the paddock, he'd be like, oh, I loved you destroying Benson today. Oh, loved it. Please keep doing it, even though I can't listen. So we still have to do it. We still have to keep up appearances. Speaking of DRS chicken, Simon said just getting dinner ready, and he's found the recipe for DRS chicken. It's just got a little bit less wing than normal, which I didn't think was too bad. I thought that was a good effort, Simon. 18 minutes to go. Let me read you the order. Max, I don't know why I asked permission, but I'm going to. Max Verstappen quickest on a 1 minute 29.603. 2 tenths quicker than Fernando Alonso. Third, Sergio Perez, 3 tenths further back. 4 tenths to Ocon in fourth. George Russell about 4 tenths away in fifth position. Gasly in sixth, less than half a second away from Verstappen. Same is true of Stroll in seventh place. Hülkenberg in eighth. Then it's Leclerc and Sainz, the 2 Ferraris, in ninth and 10th. Hamilton in 11th. Norris in 12th. 13th Tsunoda. 14th Albon. 15th is Kevin Magnussen. And then Joe De Vries, Sargent, Piastri and Bottas, the 20 runners. Interesting question here. And, well, I'm interested in both of your opinions. David says, I'm new to F1, and regarding Hamilton, is it ever just the driver going through a patch of not driving as quickly? Most sports, it seems like the athlete has a patch where they just can't perform to their usual standards, a slump in form. But in F1, like, it's always sort of the car's fault, which I think is a very interesting, so I think people will look at him, Hamilton's no good this year, for example.
It's a good question from David. I think you can argue that everyone has bad weekends, bad couple of races. It definitely happens. The thing that's a bit different with Formula One is that every team obviously has 2 cars. So you can get a bit of a sense if someone's having a bad weekend or a good weekend. And, it's the old adage within F1, you can only ever beat your teammates. So if both cars are off the pace, it's probably unlikely that they're both having a bad weekend, and so you can probably put it down to the car. You also just get a bit of an idea over the course of the season how the car's performing. We've spoken about McLaren already. They're not doing great so far. Mercedes is struggling, we know that. Actually, should we touch on the Toto Wolff press conference that happened while we're talking about Mercedes, actually? But yeah, David, just to answer your question, you absolutely can have bad races, bad couple of races. Everyone has personal lives and issues that can take hold sometimes, but these guys are professional athletes like in any other sport, and once they're in the car and the visor comes down, they are extremely competitive.
But we never really, I don't know, sometimes I agree with that often there's always this assumption that drivers are getting the most out of the cars every weekend, or that the quickest driver out of the 2 of them is getting the most out of it. And I think it's really interesting sometimes the sort of driver performance gets a little lost in the car performance, and I know it's so intrinsic in Formula One that it's a little bit different, but I do find it really interesting. I mean, last year Daniel Ricciardo suddenly, or last 2 years, here's Charles Leclerc's radio.
What happened?
I will come back to you.
Yeah, let me know if I can go on power or...
I will come back to you. For us, everything is fine. You can continue.
So engine resume.
Well, there was a problem with the clutch pedal, but okay.
So Leclerc having a bit of a problem with the clutch paddle, I think he said, which he struggled with in Bahrain, actually, pulling out of the garage. But yeah, sometimes I feel like it's a bit appreciated, the importance of drivers in Formula One, which I know sounds a bit stupid, but when you look at, you know, so much of the leap, in my opinion, for Aston Martin this year, well, a decent chunk of it will be Alonso.
Yeah, you know, when you go to the races and you speak to all the drivers, I actually tend to find that they're pretty honest when they've had a bad race. So, you know, you speak to, so obviously I speak to a lot of the British drivers working for a British newspaper, the likes of Lando Norris, George Russell, they actually tell you, oh, I've had a bad day, I made mistakes, it was my fault, I just had an off day. So I actually tend to find that they're quite honest. Lewis Hamilton says it as well, perhaps, you know, he apologises to the team, I wasn't quite there. So, yeah, everyone has bad days and the like, but I actually tend to find that they are honest about it, to kind of say, you know, just a bad one, let's not write me off now. Yeah. Oh, so should we talk about Wolff?
But then it never becomes a, you know, so-and-so in bad patch. They just say, oh, I had a bad day, and then everyone sort of moves on. You know what I mean? Well, they almost do their own PR for themselves.
Well, I think actually at the start of last season, when Mercedes rocked up with what looked like a sled, basically, it was so slow. And Lewis Hamilton, everyone was questioning, you know, whether he'd lost it, how he's going to come back. Was he going through a bad patch? Then obviously Saudi was probably his worst qualifying performance on just pure pace that he's possibly had in his career.
Yeah, he was out in Q1.
He was out in Q1. It was awful. And so everyone was questioning him. Was he going through a bad patch? And then, you know, later as the season progressed, Mercedes turned around and said, actually, we're using him as a guinea pig. We're trying different parts. We perhaps haven't got it quite right. But, you know, Lewis Hamilton got written off at the start of last season. Not by me, I'd like to say. I don't think suddenly within 2-3 months he'd turned into a bad driver. But there was certainly a lot of questions about, you know, was he going through a bad patch at that time?
What about his team boss?
Toto Wolff. Thanks, Jack. Nice segue. So, a very interesting press conference.
You can use some of these on the podcast if you want.
Thanks, can I? Inside the Piranha Club. Yeah, thanks. So, there was a press conference of the team principals in between these two practice sessions, and Toto Wolff, who is being very honest of late, isn't he? He was asked, because the big question for Lewis Hamilton on Thursday was, what happens if it's clear to you that Mercedes aren't going to deliver you a car in which you can win your 8th world title, which is obviously why he's still in the sport. And there have been lots of questions about where he's going to go, what teams he could possibly join. Lewis Hamilton came out, he said, I'm a Mercedes driver, I've been with them through all my career. He talks about Mercedes because they were supplying the engines when he was winning at McLaren. And then Toto Wolff was obviously asked about this as well. And a very, very interesting quote from Toto Wolff. He said, I don't think Lewis will leave Mercedes, but if he wants to win another championship, he needs to make sure he has the car. And if we cannot demonstrate that we are able to give him the car in the next couple of years, then he needs to look elsewhere. I don't think he's doing that at this stage, but I will have no grouch if that happens in a year or two. Now, that's Toto Wolff basically saying we need to provide Lewis Hamilton with the car, or we have to accept that he goes somewhere else. And, you know, Fernando Alonso is basically showing at 41, you can go up onto the podiums, you can, you know, let's hope he goes on to win a race this season. Lewis Hamilton's 38, you know, maybe he's past the peak of his career. He certainly doesn't seem to be. You know, drivers of his calibre, they can extend much longer than other drivers. But it's a really interesting comment by Wolff, who is accepting not only that their car is a dud again this year, but that actually he may be about to lose his star driver. And he's, what was his word? No grouch. I do love the translation into English that he uses sometimes.
Yeah. But there's no, I mean, but he can't have a grouch, can he? If Hamilton's like, well, because he's only here to win an 8th title. Everyone's only here to win. And so if he can't, and it's kind of becomes obvious that he can't, then why would he stay?
Well, why would he stay? And actually, he's out of contract at the end of this season. So Mercedes need to be putting something in front of Lewis Hamilton that reassures him that they are going to provide him with the car in the next couple of years. But, you know, we've been talking about regulations. They probably can't produce a car for him until 2026 when the regulations change. They're not going to make up. You know, Hamilton was saying it's a second and a half to Red Bull. They're not going to make that up over the course of this season, even though it's the longest ever in terms of race numbers. So where does he look? Is he even going to sign again with Mercedes? I think he will. I think he'll stay. Loyalty is a huge thing for Lewis Hamilton, and he will want to show his loyalty to Mercedes. He wants to stay within that stable, but I think Mercedes need to be proving to him, like I suppose, when Niki Lauda went and knocked on his door when he was at McLaren and said, look, here's our plan to give you all these championships. I think they need to be doing that again. I think they need to be sitting him down and saying, we are certain we can build you the car. Verstappen radio.
My chances are really, really bad.
Stand by.
So it's just super long, the whole downshift procedure.
Is there a specific corner, Max?
Last corner is really...
So the downshift's taking a long time for Max Verstappen as he's out there on a long run. But there comes a point, doesn't there, where what can you say to, like, getting him to convince him to come along to Mercedes? One thing, we've got this great plan, we're hiring these people, yeah, cool. I don't know, what can you say to him if you're told, we promised to be better?
Perhaps they just need to listen to him.
Well, yeah, that's very true. That's very true. 9 minutes and 13 seconds left on the clock.
And so now, for the moment within FP2 that we are all waiting for, the most exciting part of not just Friday practice, but the whole weekend.
The whole weekend.
Are you ready for this?
Long Run Corner with Andrew Benson.
Did you enjoy that, doing it for the first time?
So much. Can I do it again? Can I come back every Friday? Oh, no. Producer Paddy says no.
No.
Do you know what? We spent all day talking about how dominant Red Bull are.
No, don't do this to me, Benson. Do not do this to me.
I've got some really interesting numbers here. Okay.
They better be interesting.
On the soft tyre, unfortunately, there's quite an even split between the field, and I'm now not charting any more times because obviously I'm talking, so we're going to have to stop after this. But on the soft tyre, Max Verstappen, after 6 flying laps, 1 minute 35.176 average. Carlos Sainz, 1 minute 35.169.
Whoa.
And on the Mercedes aren't as quick. They're doing 35.4 for Russell and 35.6 for Hamilton. And on the medium tyre, Sergio Perez, 35.347 average. Fernando Alonso, 35.213 average. Charles Leclerc, 35.25. Looks pretty even on race pace.
And
don't know how, but it does. Those are the numbers.
I don't think Verstappen's pushing at all.
Well, he can't be looking at that, can he? Given he was like 7 tenths quicker than Leclerc in Bahrain. But anyway, those are the numbers. But he
literally did this on Friday in Bahrain as well, didn't he? He was basically just dawdling around, finding the lines that he wanted to find, but doing it at half the speed of everyone else. And, well, we saw how the weekend unfolded.
Well...
Oh, no, have we made Long Run Corner? Is it redundant now?
Oh, it's always been redundant. Interesting. And so, sorry, remind me, where was Alonso in that?
So Alonso is a tenth quicker than Perez, and Leclerc is between them. And Verstappen and Sainz are basically doing the same speed.
Oh, okay, because Alonso's out. He was out he is out on the medium
Perez,
tyre.
Leclerc and Alonso on the medium, Verstappen and Sainz and Mercedes drivers on the soft.
Okay.
But straight line speed isn't the issue, is it? It's the corner. I mean, this is why Red Bull was so dominant in Bahrain, because they're so fast through the slower medium corners, and we don't really have any corners here, and there wasn't really an argument about straight line speed with the Ferraris, which is why we thought they would be slightly closer, or as your numbers are suggesting, they are closer. So that's a good sign. We can all get excited again, and then on Sunday night we can all be disappointed again.
Sounds about right.
Whether there's a race weekend or not. 6 minutes and 10 seconds to go. I don't even know what I mean by that. Just felt like a thing to say. Lando Norris has returned to the pit lane. Everybody else is still out on circuit. Charles Leclerc, he's had a big swapper. That is coming into this, honestly, this circuit. I think it's turn 4. Where a big slide on the rear for Charles Leclerc, and then he had to go through the runoff area. Nick de Vries in the AlphaTauri has just come through turns 1 and 2, and then had Hamilton emerge just ahead of him, and de Vries taking some mildly evasive action in the AlphaTauri team. And look, it's not very often this happens, but Franz Tost was very interesting in the team principal press conference earlier on today, Andrew. Nothing against Franz Tost, but it's rare that I don't know how to say this now without sounding mean.
What are you trying to say?
He's not. He's
the headlines. He's a boss of a team that literally no one cares about. That's why he's not interesting.
Yeah. Impartial Benson.
Yeah.
Anyway, he has actually been interesting today. And by the way, everyone, Franz Tost is a very nice person. I like him a lot. He's very straightforward, Franz, and this is exactly what he's been today. We expected a much better car, he said. We need to make the car faster, especially on the aerodynamics. And he says he doesn't trust the engineers anymore because what they tell him never turns out to be true. There's not enough downforce, the car's unstable under braking, it overheats the rear tyres, it's washing out at the apex, and then it hurts traction. Everything that you need to do a good lap time, he says, we don't have.
I mean, it's honest. I mean, if you think Wolf's being honest, I think Tost has gone on a different level.
Yeah. Tost does come out with some amazing stuff. Like at times, it's just...
He's the one who wants to race like every day, isn't he? So there can't be too many races for Franz Tost.
Yeah, exactly. I remember I don't know if I can tell this story now.
Too late, carry on.
So it was the you know what? Here's Leclerc's radio.
Is everything okay, engine-wise?
We'll come back to you.
If you're Leclerc, you must be starting to get, like a bit paranoid about the reliability, right?
Yeah, every shake, rattle, you're just fearing for the worst. And we were talking about it in FP1. Frepsser, the new team principal over at Ferrari, one of his biggest jobs now is going to be making sure the drivers have their heads down, their morale is high, but they've got confidence in that car because we're seeing these speedometers hit 300 kilometers an hour, and if you don't have faith in your car, that's bad. Anyway, Jack, let's go back to the story. Come on, that you don't want to tell, which means it's a good one.
No, it's not that great. It was just that after, and it's all. So after free practice 1. Was it ahead of free practice 1 before free practice 2 in Saudi Arabia last season? So after
this is not starting well this time.
We can't see anything. Can you be a bit more specific? What happened or where?
No, I think it was maybe a big surge.
Understood.
So that's the Ferrari team saying that they aren't 100% sure what they're seeing, and Leclerc saying maybe it's just a big surge. 9th and 10th quickest at the moment, the Ferraris. Leclerc ahead of Sainz, but on the long runs looking a little more competitive. Max Verstappen's going to end the session quickest. We've only got 2 minutes and 15 seconds to go.
So tell the story.
Okay, I'm going for it, right. So before free practice 2 last year, obviously there had been the strike over, near the circuit, and there was the drivers' meeting, right? And everyone's going to the drivers' meeting, and I'm sure you both remember it. It's a big deal. Tsunoda had no idea it was happening. He was like in the car getting ready for FP2, and then they were like, why isn't Yuki at the drivers' meeting? It was like, what drivers? So then he had to go running up the paddock because I didn't get invited or whatever, or didn't get the memo that there was this big important drivers meeting going on, which I just find it like he's ready to go ahead of FP2, like in the car, and visor coming down, and all the other drivers are in there discussing this missile strike and everything, and Yuki's like, oh, what?
I'm really glad I pushed for that story.
It wasn't good. I know it wasn't good.
No.
It was one of those that didn't feel good
listeners.
Or interesting, and also I wasn't sure if I was allowed to say it. I never know what I'm allowed to say or not allowed to say on the radio. I just guess and go for it. Less than a minute to go. Well, like when is something off the record or not? That's where I'm scared of getting caught out.
I mean, he was literally on camera in the car while the other 19 drivers were at the meeting.
He?
Yeah,
I don't remember that.
It was quite well known.
Oh, fine.
It was like the longest 4 hours of my life waiting for a resolution to come. So, actually, not as long as the 4 hours after 2021 in Abu Dhabi.
Well, true. Or surely during 2021 Spa. That was long.
I've chosen to forget that. That was horrific. And cold and wet.
30 seconds to go. And I'm sure you're all going to be very disappointed with my story as well. So please don't be too mean. If I'd have just said it as a throwaway, then it would have been fine. But I got a bit scared of saying it out loud. Verstappen quickest, Alonso second, Perez third, Ocon fourth, Russell fifth. That's the top five as the checkered flag comes out at the end of the session. Pierre Gasly sixth, Stroll seventh, Hülkenberg eighth, ninth and 10th for the Ferraris of Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. Hamilton 11th, Norris 12th, 13th Tsunoda, 14th Albon, 15th Kevin Magnussen, Joe, De Vries, Sargent, Piastri and Bottas, the 20 drivers. And again, it's really tight, the field. It was in free practice 2, I think, in Bahrain, just 1.4 seconds separating Verstappen down to Bottas. But again, these were very, I don't know, it feels very reminiscent of free practice 2 in Bahrain, doesn't it? Where suddenly, it all looks a bit closer and maybe we've got a fight on our hands.
Yeah, but we know we don't.
I know.
Sorry, I'm supposed to big it up, aren't I?
No, not at all. You're done with us now for the weekend, so you can be like, you don't have to sell the coverage over the remainder of the weekend. But
I'll be
fine.
Listening.
Will you?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, that's very kind.
I always listen.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you. Checkered flag is out. Verstappen takes the checkered flag. Alonso finishing in second place. The Ferraris are a bit of a mystery in that session, being so far off the pace on one lap pace, but there or thereabouts in the race runs. Andrew, what do you make of it?
Well, it's a bit early in the season to be sort of confidently making predictions about this and that, isn't it? Because we've only got one sample of evidence from Bahrain. On the face of it, I would say that Ferrari are not going to qualify 9th and 10th, and they must be running in a different spec than everybody else. I think the big
running their engine turned down because they're worried about reliability.
Exactly, that's exactly what I was going to say. I think the big takeaway from today, or at least the last 2 or 3 days, on Ferrari is that they're in a world of pain on reliability again. That I think is as much a concern for them as their performance. Race pace, as we said, the performance doesn't look too bad, so I expect that they'll qualify somewhere close to the front. The Aston Martin looks in decent shape, and pretty much no one else, even though it's close.
Are you expecting Mercedes to be closer to the... Like, are they the same as Ferrari in terms of we're expecting more pace, or they're about where you'd expect?
Russell in 5th is about where you'd expect, yeah. Exactly. Hamilton's had a bit of a difficult day, obviously, in 11th place. He's half a second behind Russell. That's obviously not representative of what he's capable of. There's nothing to choose between those two in qualifying. I would say we're not seeing a vastly different picture from Bahrain, basically.
I was just going to say, maybe Hamilton's having a bad day.
Yeah, maybe. Just getting a look at Carlos Sainz coming through turns 4 and 5 and having to take a bit of evasive action around Sergio Perez coming into the next left-hander. Actually, Perez didn't know he was there at all. Very nearly collided because Perez then turned into the left-hander. Had a little check of both mirrors, to be fair, and then suddenly turned left and he was right there, Carlos Sainz. So that was a bit of a moment for Perez. So Alpine looking strong, finishing 4th and 6th quickest. Did you do any long run Alpine? No, fine. Fine, understandable, and we'll see what and any AlphaTauri long run pace. Andrew.
Now you're having a laugh.
We're always having a laugh.
I've already said what people think of AlphaTauri.
Yeah, exactly.
May have gone a bit far with that remark, but anyway, it's said now. It's out there.
Yeah, you can't take it back. Can't take it back. So the race gets underway on Sunday afternoon. We'll be back for free practice 3 tomorrow afternoon, and then qualifying in the evening, 6 o'clock local time in the UK time, 8 o'clock local time. If that makes any sense in Saudi Arabia for that to get underway. Beck, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, it was great. And if I'm ever invited back, at least I know, and the listeners know, I won't be fed cheese.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's it's good to know. So good to get that one out of the way pretty early on. I think we did it with Sam Bird as well. I think it's the first thing he got asked. So if you want to find out Alice Powell's favourite cheese, join us tomorrow for the third practice session and qualifying, and we will speak to you then. And there'll be a post-race, post-qualifying podcast as well tomorrow evening, and a post-race podcast on Sunday as well, of course. So Verstappen quickest, Alonso second, but long-run pace looking fairly close between Verstappen and the Ferraris. A lot to still be determined when we come back for free practice and qualifying tomorrow. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.